Hi Yr9, this video contains another couple of skills to assist you to work your way through exercise 2H, and this video involves transposing formulas. So the word transpose means to rearrange. So when we ask you to transpose the following formula to make R the subject, at the moment in that formula, I is the subject. So in English, what that question is asking you to do is to rearrange that formula to make it in the form R equals something. So you can do that relatively easily by hand. So with your algebra skills, if you know that I is equal to P times R times T divided by 100, what we need to be able to do is to rearrange this right-hand side of the equation in terms that we can get rid of everything that's been done to R and leave R on its own. So the first thing I can see would help would be to multiply both sides of the equation by 100. And in doing that, this 100 and this 100 cancel. So it simplifies a little bit already to 100I is equal to P times R times T. So now still a bit more rearranging needed on the right-hand side. So P times R times T basically means that R has been multiplied by P and also multiplied by T. So to get rid of those two variables, I could divide by P times T. And if I then divided the left-hand side by P times T also, this T cancels with this T, this P cancels with this P, and I'm left purely with R on its own on the right-hand side. And 100I divided by P times T on the left-hand side can't cancel. Nothing there can cancel. So I'm done, except for normally when we're writing mathematical formulas, the subject needs to go on the left-hand side of the equation rather than the right. So all I need to do now is just to flip the two sides of the equation so that it looks nicer, and I've got the subject on the left-hand side. So R is equal to 100I divided by P times T. So if we were trying to do that on the calculator, it's much quicker and simpler. So again, using our solve function that we use so often already, menu, algebra, solve, and I need to type in the equation as it appears in its original form. So I need to type in there I is equal to, use a fraction template, P times R times T on the top of the fraction. So P times R times T. Remember to tell the calculator to multiply those three variables, otherwise the calculator thinks PRT is a quantity on its own. So P times R times T divided by 100. And tell your calculator you want to solve that for R. Basically that means to the calculator, rearrange that formula and make R the subject. So in one step, you have done all that algebra there, rearrange that into R equals 100I divided by PT. Okay, a second one, just a quick little second example there. This one wants us to transpose or rearrange this formula to make V the subject. So we want to rearrange it so it looks like V equals something rather than P being the subject at the moment, P equals something. So we're going to rearrange that first of all by hand and then check it on the calculator. So in this example, this V greater than 0 basically means something towards the end of the question. So when we're doing this example, if we have P is equal to V squared over R, and what I want to do is try and rearrange it so V is on its own. At the moment, V's been squared and V's also been divided by R. So I've got to undo those things first of all. So if I multiply both sides by R to undo that divide by R, this R and this R will cancel, and I end up with V squared is equal to R times P. So again, I'd probably switch these around so that I've got the subject on the left-hand side. It's not quite there yet, but it's getting there. So V squared equals RP, if I just quickly swap the two sides of the equation. Now, hopefully you remember to undo a square, you would take a square root of both sides. And when you take the square root of a number, I hope you remember that there's two answers. So for example, if I was doing the square root and asking you to calculate the square root of 25, hopefully you would know plus 5, positive 5 is an answer, but also the one we forget most of all is that negative 5 is also an answer. Okay, probably and is better than or actually, and negative 5. So positive 5 and negative 5. When we take a square root, we end up with two possible answers. In this particular question, this part of the question is saying don't worry about the negative part, v being negative, just give me the positive answer, v greater than 0. Okay, so when I take a square root of both sides of this equation, basically what I'm doing is undoing the square, and I end up with the square root of r times p as my answer, the positive answer rather than the negative answer as well. So when you do that on your calculator, if you're doing something like that using solve, menu, algebra and solve, type in the equation as you see it in the original question, p is equal to, with your fraction template again, v squared divided by r, and we want to solve that for v, comma v. When you hit your answer, you'll be a bit shocked at the answer there. It looks a bit messy. All your calculator's saying there is we've got a negative answer and a positive answer. Because you know from the question it has to be the positive answer, we would only need to write down this part of our answer. V is equal to the square root of p times r, the positive version. When you think you've got that skill under control, using solve maybe to check your answers and using by hand algebra to actually get your answers, there's some more questions from exercise 2H in there suggested. Question 4, a few suggested examples to try to get that skill up to scratch.